Hi there, Dr. Paul Donovan here, and today I'm going to be exploring with you the incredibly rich relationship between how we use our power and the psychological safety that is enjoyed around us when we use that power. Power and psychological safety. It's an extraordinarily important connection, but let's back up just a little bit first. We know from Gallup research, Gallup does the biggest surveys on management engagement on earth. They do about 1 million people and do it every year. Gallup survey shows that about 70% of us working are disengaged. Isn't that incredible? 70%. That means that 70% of us, when we get up in the morning, are not that happy to go to work. We can't even drag ourselves to work. It doesn't mean we don't go, and it doesn't mean we don't put the hours in. Many of us put long hours in, but we're not engaged. A smaller proportion of that 70% are in fact actively disengaged. That means they're quietly sabotaging the office that they work in. Isn't that extraordinary? 70% are disengaged, and we know that engagement levels predict everything about an organization's performance. Engagement levels correlate to increasing revenue, dropping people turnover. They correlate to discretionary effort. They correlate to decreased costs. They correlate to increased profit. Anything that you would like to measure that you think could be useful or wholesome to create in a business is predicted by engagement levels. So, next step, how is it that engagement levels are actually defined within organizations, and who impacts them most? Well, it's no surprise to you, I suppose, that 70% of all variation in engagement levels is determined by one single factor, and that factor is the worker's direct manager. It's the worker's direct manager who is the most important single factor in determining the engagement levels of the person underneath them in the tree, in the hierarchy. Wow, why is that? I want to explain that it's because we as human beings are scanning our environment and we're looking up to those who exercise more power than us to determine if this environment is safe or not. We are wired to be scanning this space constantly to be determining that, and we're looking to our manager who is exercising more power than us to clarify if this is a safe environment. We're looking up. We're not looking down to determine that, and we're not even looking sideways. We primarily look up. We're looking up to those who exercise more power. And of course, we know they do. They allocate work to us. They're usually the people who are closest to our work. They allocate acknowledgement or criticism, remuneration, bonuses, whether we get certain projects, whether we get to work with certain people. A lot of that decision making is made one step above us. But more than that, we are looking to the person above us to determine whether we personally can relax, whether we can contribute, whether we can challenge, whether we can bring an idea that may not be fully formed, whether we can share a problem that we haven't figured out how to solve yet. We are looking directly up to find out if all of those things are, whether they're possible or not. You know, Daniel Coyle in his recent book, The Culture Code, spent 4 years traveling the globe and studying the best, the most powerful and winning teams on Earth. He came up with 3 skills that work true across those most effective teams. Do you know what the first skill was? The first skill was build safety. The second skill was related to it, share vulnerably. Isn't that interesting? The third was create a common purpose. You see, those winning teams knew, and the managers who ran them knew, that it was their job to constantly look to cultivate a place where people felt safe. People felt safe to share, to talk, to share their problems, to share their challenges, to share their ideas, to even challenge their boss and to challenge each other. And it was in those teams that were vibrant teams, humming teams, that solved great dilemmas. Isn't that fascinating? So the great and last thing I want to let you know is we have now a map. We have mapped the behavior that bosses do when they use their power well and create safety, or when they use their power poorly and erode it. So Here you have 7 scales. This scale is taken from Dr. Julie Diamond's work. And she has created a 360 tool. I don't have any financial take in that tool, but that tool has now given us a map to measure how well managers and leaders are utilizing their power. And in each case, if you're at the good use of power end, you are creating a better, safer condition around people can thrive, contribute, challenge, and get great work done. If you're at the poor use of that, then in each case you're eroding psychological safety. So for instance, in that first one, intimidating versus approachable, we know that bosses, managers and leaders who foster the free exchange of ideas, who are not too critical of people underneath them, and don't criticize people personally, who are not the first to speak in meetings, but maybe rather the later on, and who look to create conditions where people can share thoughts and insights, they're approachable. Where you can't do that, you become intimidating. Where they do not exercise skills to allow people to find voice, but rather use their management rank and status as a platform from which to make sure their voice is primarily heard, and that's the critical difference. And if they do that, if they're using their rank to basically sound their voice and not to equally prioritize using their rank as a place to create a forum for others to find their voice, that's when you become intimidating. And even Gallup's own research shows that bosses and managers who experience this approaching have teams who are way more engaged. Why? Because they're safer. They're safer. Intimidating versus approachable. So if we skip a couple down, we have disengaging and empowering. Managers who are so preoccupied with their own work that they do not set clear expectations, they do not give feedback on someone's work in those expectations, and they do not attend to the developmental needs of their workers, are in fact experienced as disengaging. And that makes work unsafe. If you don't know exactly what the expectations of the boss are and how you are going in relation to those expectations, then it becomes a place of navigating, trying to second guess whether you're doing the right thing and how well you're doing it. And that is not a safe environment, and it will not bring the best out. Let's choose one more, a conflict averse versus conflict competent. Managers who do not attend to the tensions of their team, who don't lean in and help team connect and talk about those tensions, or managers who delay decisions because they think making certain decisions might create tension or controversy, those managers are conflict averse rather than conflict competent. You see, once again, the misuse of power by that manager to avoid those circumstances, to avoid those important conversations, means that teams become more tense, less safe, and not a place where people can thrive and grow. Professor Keegan, Robert Keegan, in one of his more recent books shown here, suggests that about 50% of energy for most people at work is spent doing something called status management, constantly looking around, determining, is it safe for me to actually contribute, for me to actually make a difference, to share a problem I'm seeing, to share an error I made, to share an idea, to challenge an idea. You see, we don't do that because we're constantly checking the environment to see whether it's safe, and we're spending 50% of our energy on that rather than doing the job. Isn't that incredible? One last book, a lovely little book, the 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. This is a beautiful book and I recommend it. You know, here the author says, in teams there must be high levels of intellectual friction, but low levels of social friction. If we don't have low levels of social friction, and by the way, that's all psychological safety is, low levels of interpersonal tension or friction. Unless that's low, we cannot get high intellectual friction, where ideas can be exchanged, where problems can be worked on, and we can have robust conversations on things of substance. Yes, the relationship between how managers use their power and safety is a very rich one. And fortunately, in the scales that I've just spoken through, I've mentioned just 3 of the 7, give very clear insight into how managers can behave to make the environment in which they serve safer and where those underneath them can thrive. I hope you've enjoyed this. There's so much more we can say on this topic, but I just want to make this brief and engaging. I hope you enjoy looking at these texts. If you're a manager, remember, make the space around you safe. All right. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.